Hi, I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. An absolute pleasure to be able to speak to you today. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Huge congrats on the show. For people who haven't seen the Institute yet, can you give us a brief intro? What can they expect going in?
Well, I think, Stephen King is a pretty reliable genius, and he's the master at kind of taking the audience and holding them in this place where they don't know what's going to happen next, and they're just unsettled enough to want to keep watching and trying to figure out and stay ahead of him, which is kind of impossible. And so I think this is really a great example of what a phenomenal storyteller he is.
And it just never fails to amaze me just how many books he's written, just how amazing each one is. There seems to be sort of endless material there for adaptations, for TV, for film. What do you think it is that makes him stand out so much, not just in the way he writes, but the way it translates so well to screen as well?
I think there's something in that he does kind of enlist your humanity as well, at the same time as when he's kind of scrambling your expectations. In this story, you're located just so firmly on the side of the protagonist to begin with, because you see this sweet kid with his family, and then he just kind of sets fire to that. So it's really clever the way he you're so behind this kid that you almost can't stop watching.
And maybe growing up, did you have a favourite novel or a favourite film or TV show of his work?
No, because I'm too much of a baby. He's too good of a writer of this genre for me. So every time I try, he's so effective, and I'm just kind of a baby when it comes to being scared. But I have heard from a lot of people who are kind of addicted to this genre are actually people who have a great deal of anxiety, and they feel that for the time period of watching something with this amount of thrill, their anxiety is kind of quelled because it's directed and they know that it's going to end, so it doesn't feel like they're not in control of it, which I thought was kind of an interesting way to look at it. The way he kind of gives his audience like a break in a way and a release at the end.
And of course, he's not only a master of the genre in general, particularly creating his villains. And maybe it's most disturbing when we can relate to them in a way. And I guess with Miss Sixby, perhaps that was something you were grappling with, of the way, to obviously dig into sinister side, but also find a humanity. So what was your approach to playing her?
I think I credit really Jack with that, with his, always going back to that idea of like, how far would you go? And I think in her mind, she is firmly on the right side of history and is doing things for the greater good of the world. And I think there's really she's that dangerous person that blames her bad behavior on someone else and justifies, any ills, that she commits. Like, she feels that it's really, she's on the right side trying to save the world.
And did you have any kind of reference points of maybe trying to get into the psychology of a character
Thankfully,
like that?
I don't know anyone like that. But actually, we all know versions of that. And we've all, I think, been guilty of that at some point in your life. It's like the impulse to kind of, when you do something really that you're not proud of, is to try to kind of justify it somehow, which is that's when everything starts going.
And of course, working with a lot of young actors, particularly with Joe, what was it like on set, and how did you kind of maybe build that trust?
Was really so lovely and so smart. And there was actually one day towards the end when everything was kind of going wrong for an actor. It was like we didn't have any time, and it could only be shot one way, and they were right up in his face with the camera, and somebody was narrating things off camera, like, and now the bookcase falls. And he just kind of deftly just dove in and navigated it so beautifully. And I was so impressed. It was that day when I saw, like, okay, everything's going wrong, and he managed to kind of wrestle himself together and deliver something amazing.
And I always think when you're watching something that's sort of like such high intensity suspense, you know, whether that sort of translates to you guys when you're on the shoot too, you know, did you find that, or was it something kind of more fun and relaxed actually when you sort of, the camera stopped rolling?
You know, the kids were taking it really seriously, but then also there are those scenes with the cake and the kazoos and everything, and it did start to skew really dark. And you have kids that are like, oh, give them cigarettes and candy and soda, and it's so perverse and kind of perfect at the same time. It's so effective.
And in terms of the takeaways from a show like this, I mean, I think it was Ben saying earlier, maybe you also kind of alluding to there at the beginning, is there something cathartic about putting an audience in this very tense environment? But it's also very thought-provoking, you know, thinking about these moments of loss of innocence, which I know Stephen King often deals with, systemic abuse.
Yeah.
What do you think people come out feeling after they've watched the show?
You know, I don't know. I'm usually not very good at like what people take away because I never tend to watch the final product. I will say, I think, you know, there is something to like kids having these like really incredible, fertile minds and abilities and just completely extinguishing their potential. It's so tragic, and it's such a brilliant, dramatic device to kind of watch that happen, that you're just kind of hanging on, praying for some kind of benediction somewhere. And I don't know how he just knows how to do that. It's just some crazy, phenomenal ability he has.
You've had such a phenomenal career across theatre, film, TV, so many awards. How do you go about picking your roles now? And I guess as a woman, how have you seen the industry change? Do you feel like there's a lot more, so many more rich and layered roles out there? Do you feel like there's still things that need to be improved?
I feel like for a time it was really inspiring because there were a lot of parts for older women. It felt like that kind of stigma had changed a little bit. But then, you know, the business kind of slowed down, and there was the pandemic, and there's this, and now it's like the streaming and the corporate this and that. And so there's not as much being made. And I think it would be great if we could go back to the model of kind of like independent movies. You know, where you're like changing clothes in the bathroom and nobody has any budget, and just so that people can get back to the actual, the excitement of telling a great story, as opposed to like, oh, maybe this will be bankable for this audience, you know. I think there might be a few too many people kind of at the helm at the moment who aren't necessarily creative people, and they're pulling the strings, and that makes things, you know, a little bit hard.
Would you ever kind of go into the, you know, sort of
Never.
Production side, like Nicole Kidman or directing?
I mean, unless somebody, you know, handed me something and said, you know, I love working with kids, directing kids. I used to have like a drama camp for kids. I just love working with them. But, you know, it's not like I would have ever asked for money for it, you know, but that's the only other job I could see. No, I don't have any desire to like be in those rooms and make those decisions. Cut to me, because then I always end up doing the things I say I'll never do. So I'll probably see you in a year and I'll be like, so I'm executive producer of...
Watch this space. Well, thank you so much for sharing all that with me. Huge congrats on the show. Can't wait for everyone else to see it. Thanks so much.